Alright lads, today we'll be covering one of the most infamous Soviet vehicles currently in War Thunder, the BMP-2. While you might think that this tank is different from the BMP-1 due to the different designation, the tank is simply an upgrade to the existing BMP-1 chassis, notably the turret. While there may be some differences between the two tanks, it is essentially a BMP-1 hull with an upgraded turret and a new 30mm autocannon. The BMP-2 also features a missile launcher mounted on top of the turret, as well as a trusted old Soviet log, the most crucial part of any Soviet tank design. But anyway lads, the BMP-2 is a rank 6 battle rating 8.3 light tank located in the Soviet tech tree. While currently only present in the Soviet tech tree, like the BMP-1, this tank could come to the German tech tree at some point. However, I think the German tech tree is already a little bit overpowered, to be honest. It doesn't really need this tank. To unlock this little light tank, you're going to have to grind out 180,000 research points before unlocking it for 500,000 silver lions. To put the tank in your lineup, it's going to cost you 140,000 silver lions. And the expert in ace qualification, that'll set you back 500,000 silver lions and 2,000 golden eagles respectively. In terms of the rewards, and when playing realistic battles and with a premium account, you can expect an RP modifier of 428% and a silver line modifier of 225%. In terms of customization, you have several camouflages available for golden eagles, and 4 camouflages available on the Guardian marketplace, making the BMP-2 one of the most customizable tanks currently in War Thunder. My personal favourite is the tricolour Saraf camouflage. I believe this is of Indian descent, and in my opinion, the 4 Guardian marketplace skins are pretty bad, to be honest. So I'd either go with the Saraf camouflage or the Finnish summer camouflage. So lads, due to the sheer popularity of the BMP-2, it's quite obvious that it's a pretty good tank. But what makes it so well liked? And should you grind it? Well, that's the point of this video, and let's get straight into it. In realistic battles, the BMP-2 is powered by an engine-producing 300 horsepower. Combined with the vehicle's weight of 14 tons, which is very light, the engine gives the tank a power-to-weight ratio of 21.4 horsepower per ton, which for a battle rating 8.3 is very good. The tank accelerates quickly, but does have the old Soviet weakness of being pretty sluggish when trying to turn. Due to carrying infantry as well in the back, the vehicle is quite long, giving it a pretty bad turning circle, to be honest. It's like some of the other Chinese vehicles. I know this isn't Chinese, but a lot of the Chinese tanks tend to be very sluggish when trying to turn, but fast in a straight line. And this tank is fast. It can reach a top speed of 65 km per hour going forwards and 11 km per hour in reverse. This is slightly above average in terms of reverse speed. A lot of Soviet tanks are very slow, but this one, it's alright, to be honest. It isn't as good as NATO tanks, but that's the Soviet doctrine. Cheap and cheerful, really. But anyway, on to the survivability. The BMP-2 as a tank itself has a crew of 3 men, a driver in the front, and a gunner and commander in the turret. In real life, it would have dismounted troops located in the rear of the vehicle, but those troops have sadly been deployed to Ukraine. Only having a crew of 3 men does leave the tank very vulnerable to incoming fire. A round penetrating the side of the vehicle and knocking out the commander and the gunner will result in your tank being lost. The same can be said for the front of the vehicle, as the driver and commander are located directly behind each other. Granted, this is only a very narrow part of the front of the vehicle, having to take a round on the right hand side of the tank for this to happen, but you do die very quickly in the BMP-2, usually in one hit. The tank also does have the hull rate mechanic, so any sort of high explosive or chemical round hitting you is likely to also knock out the tank in a single hit. But if we test the BMP-2's armour against its own gun at a range of 100 meters, using its APDS belt, we can see that the lower frontal plate offers you around 51mm of protection. If we move up to the upper frontal plate, which is incredibly well sloped, that protection rises to around 80mm of protection. And again moving up to the turret, and we have the same around 46mm of protection as the lower frontal plate. All in all, the BMP-2 is very squishy. While it has decent performance, it doesn't have the armour or survivability to really brawl. While the tank's weaponry is incredibly powerful, as we'll soon see in the next part of this video, the same cannot be said for its armour. While you can get stuck in, so to say, in this tank, it's best to be in the second line of attack, behind your more heavily armoured Soviet main battle tanks. Alright, on to the favourite part of all my reviews, the firepower. And surprisingly for a battle rating 8.3 vehicle, the BMP-2 is ridiculously well armed. Its primary weapon is the 30mm 2A42 cannon. This has an incredibly high fire rate and can rip through the sides of pretty much any vehicle, no matter the battle rating. You can carry a total of 500 rounds of ammunition, split across several belts of ammunition. One of the downsides of this tank is the vertical guidance characteristics. This is a bit of a mixed sword though, as you do have a very good 74 degrees of gun elevation, but a very bad 4 degrees of gun depression. This allows you to use the BMP-2 as a makeshift anti-aircraft vehicle. War Thunder veterans out there will know that the BMP-2 used to be the most effective counter to the early helicopter spam. Back when you could spawn a helicopter first with full ATGMs and rush an enemy, it was the BMP-2s, not the Shilkers, that were the main force to counter this helicopter threat. One of the best things about this gun is the fact that it is fully stabilised in both the horizontal and vertical planes. This allows you to shoot this gun fairly accurately at full speed. It's also worth pointing out that you may recognise this gun, and that's because it's the same weapon as found on the KA-50 helicopter. As you'd expect for a battle rating 8.3 vehicle, and especially for a Soviet vehicle, this tank does not feature any sort of thermal imaging system. Other tanks at battle rating 8.3, like the Beglite Panzer, does get thermal imaging, but again, that is a rarity. But what is a gun without its ammunition? Our stock belt for the BMP-2 is a 30mm belt, obviously. The belt contains armour-piercing tracing and high explosive fragmentary incendiary rounds. This gives you an armour-piercing round with 65mm of penetration, and then a high explosive round, which will contact and impact. This is a best of both worlds, you could say. You can still damage most of enemy tanks that you'll face. Most NATO main battle tanks at around 8.7 only have around 30 to 40mm of side armour, so this belt is pretty strong early on in the grind. In the first rank of our upgrades though, we do get a mainly AP belt. This has 3 armour piercing rounds for every 1 high explosive round, but it's the same penetration as the stock belt really. While this belt does have more armour piercing rounds, it does of course cost Silver Lions, so you could still remain using the default belt and get pretty much the same performance. In the third rank of our modifications, we then unlock the APDS belt. This is Armour Piercing Discarding SAKO. This belt contains 4 APDS rounds for every 1 armour piercing round. Whereas the normal armour piercing round can provide you 65mm of penetration, the Armour Piercing Discarding SAKO round gives you 82mm of penetration. While this doesn't seem like a massive increase, the performance of the APDS belt is legendary within War Thunder. It frankly just mauls anything that it'll come across. The rounds are also very small, being sub-caliber ammunition, meaning they can find themselves through the weak spots of a lot of main battle tanks. Basically, this allows you to mine through people's turret rings in reality. It just allows you to piss people off that you can't really do in any other way. Due to volumetric arm shell thing, whatever it's called, that update, what they had introduced that was kind of a bit shitty. You couldn't really troll people with the weak spots anymore, like the turret ring. But with this, you can just shoot straight through it pretty much, especially like Abrams turret rings. Like a lot of Soviet era vehicles, it's pretty simple, but it's just real good at pissing people off. Apart from the rapid firing, very stabilised gun, we also have the 9M113 missile. This is mounted on the top of the turret and is a second generation guided missile. This means that it is guided by your mouse and not by your WASD keyboard. The missile itself has a range of 3 kilometers and contains 4.23 kilos of TNT. It of course uses a high explosive anti-tank warhead, giving it 500mm of penetration. It's worth noting, however, this is not a tandem-shaped warhead, so it will not be able to defeat explosive reactive armour. We also have a rifle caliber machine gun mounted coaxially, as well as several smoke grenades. That's it for the firepower, and I've got no complaints. The incredibly powerful gun, missile launcher, and fairly high top speed makes the BMP-2 an incredibly powerful support weapon on the battlefield. So to conclude, it's obvious that the BMP-2 is a good vehicle, and well worth grinding out. However, there are a few things worth mentioning. First of all, the BMP-2M. This is a modernised version of the BMP-2, located 1 battle rating higher at battle rating 8.7. That tank features the same great 30mm autocannon, but has 4 Cornet missile launchers, as well as high resolution thermal imaging. This is quite an incredible jump in terms of capability. 4 Cornet missiles and thermal imaging for 0.4 battle rating higher. Safe to say that the BMP-2M is vastly under-tiered at the minute. That has nothing really to do with the performance of the BMP-2, however. I'm just pointing out there that even though the BMP-2 is very good at battle rating 8.3, you have this vastly better tank at 8.7 which does pretty much everything the BMP-2 does, but does it a little bit better. The BMP-2M is a little bit slower, is a lot heavier, it isn't as good at flanking and spanking, but obviously 8.7, it does get up tiered to 9.7 a lot. That is really one of the big upgrades on the BMP-2. It is 8.3, so you don't really get up tiered that much anymore. And the Soviet 8.3 line is very strong. To name a few tanks, you have the Sturm S, the T-55AM Premium, the Object 906, the Shilka, the T10M, T62, all tanks that while aren't really meta defining, they are still very powerful in War Thunder. The highest battle rating you can see is obviously 9.3, which isn't very common really, and does get up tier to 9.7 a lot. So in an 8.3 lineup, it is very good for grinding in my opinion. You're facing peer vehicles pretty much every game, you aren't really getting screwed, which you will get at 8.7 now. Pretty much all of the battle rating 8.7 premiums, the old rank 6 premiums from back in the day, they're all pretty much useless now. You buy a Leopard A1A1L44 and get up tiered against T72 terms every bloody game. But obviously, yeah lads, the BMP-2 is well worth grinding out for the Soviet tech tree. In my opinion, it's better than the BMP-3. It's not as good as the BMD-4, which is honestly better than the BMP-2M as well. The fact that BMD-4 is on the marketplace of $30 is insane. It's such a good tank. But the BMP-2, it's great at battle rating 8.3, it's great at battle rating 11.0. It's a light tank, so its armour is never going to be useful, and its 30mm gun and high damage missile is still good at top tier. Like I said in the armament section, there's no complaints from me. Once again lads, thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you later.